we'll give everybody a couple minutes to kind of get in, make sure everybody can get into the webinar. So I see people like just constantly signing in. If you guys want to, you can go ahead and start in the chat box, or I believe you can go in the chat box and kind of introduce yourself, say where you're from. We're going to give everybody a couple of minutes to get into the webinar. Hi, everybody. I'm trying to see. I haven't seen any chats come through, but feel free to introduce yourself. Welcome. Hi, everybody. Still signing in. David, if you will, go ahead and take us to the first slide. All right. Hi, everybody. David, will you take us into the first slide? We can go ahead and get started.
Coming right up.
Awesome. All right. We'll go ahead and jump in. So welcome everybody to today's session. The topic of discussion is using public and private markets to find and secure housing. So we're going to have two panelists for you guys today. They're providers who've kind of established a system to search for and secure housing for veterans in their communities. We'll be discussing how to make the process more efficient and ultimately more successful, best ways to kind of navigate the market and conduct your housing search, ways to both maximize the traditional affordable housing programs and utilize the private market. The panelists will also cover some of the ways to simplify the application process and build on your existing landlord networks. So like I said, we have two guests for y'all. The first one that will speak first, Trevor Thundershield. He's the owner and support supervisor from Home Inc. Hi, Trevor. And he works out of Phoenix, Arizona. He oversees Home's landlord support staff to ensure proper landlord outreach and education, housing location services, and recruitment and retention of landlords. He's been working with Home Inc. to end homelessness since 2014, where he also acquired skills and certifications in the housing choice voucher rent calculations and housing quality inspections, or standard inspections, sorry. And then second up, we'll have Coleen Salinas, and she's the landlord engagement specialist for Minnesota Assistance Council for Veterans, so MACV. She's worked in homeless services for 25 years as both a housing provider and a service provider. She currently coordinates MACV's efforts to build and sustain relationships with landlords to provide affordable and high-quality housing for homeless veterans. So, huge thank you to you guys for participating in the panel today. Obviously, we've all done a lot of work in this area, but we certainly benefit by sharing ways to be even better. Obviously, finding housing is one thing and takes practice on its own, but finding housing that's going to be long-term successful and a good fit for each and every individual is a whole other task and requires a whole other skill set and several other considerations. So just for everybody in today's session, you can use the chat and the questions function on the right side of your screen on the drop-down menu. And we're going to save 15 minutes for the very end of the presentation to kind of go through a Q&A. So definitely send your questions in as we go along, and we'll kind of pull them and cover everything at the end. Just want to say thank you again for both of y'all for participating in today's discussion. Thank you to all the attendees, and we have a lot to cover, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to Trevor.
right. Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for all the work you guys are all doing out there. So before I jump into it, I just wanted to do a quick introduction of Home Inc. David, if you could play our slide. So you can, next, please. So just a quick introduction of Home Inc. So Home, we're a permanent supportive housing program, an operator of the programs for vulnerable individuals and families experiencing homelessness and housing instability. We also partner with public housing authorities to provide lease-up services for housing programs designed for targeted homelessness and special needs households. One really point of interest is that our partnership model is very unique. That partnership is really the backbone of what we do here at Home Inc. It's part of our ethos, and part of that partnership is we are housing. We specialize in housing, so we only do that part, and we partner with various agencies throughout the valley here in Phoenix, who provide the housing stability case management support, and also we contract with the city of Phoenix to provide the lease-up services for their HUD BASH program for the veterans. So with this, we only administer the financial rental assistance portion, and we do not provide the services as far as case management. That's what our partners do. So we're housing, that's what we specialize in. We're the best at it. Our partners, they're the best at what they do with case management. So we each have our specialty, we each have our role, and that's how we operate. Next. David? Oh, thank you. So like I said, we contract with the City of Phoenix Housing Department to provide the lease-up services. So that includes everything from conducting the initial briefings, program orientation, issuing the voucher, approving the request for tenancy approval, doing all the HQS inspections, acquiring the lease and the app contracts. And then from that point, we pass that on to the City of Phoenix to just, administer the rental portion part of it. So part of our effort in this whole lease-up process and why they contract with us to do it is because we've been doing this for 26 years. So we are 100% scattered site, tenant-based. On a month-to-month basis, we operate about 3,000 PSH and 400 rapid rehousing households, assisted monthly. And we manage it, but we get about 30 million annually rental subsidies out the door. So even though we're a small organization, we do a lot of work here. So on a month-to-month basis, we lease up about 150 households in all of our programs a month. And I guess another point of interest is that our roots are very much in the PHA world. Our Chief Programs Officer, Sharon Shore, she spent most of her career in the housing industry. And we are a licensed real estate entity. And while we do not provide property management or development services, we have and we understand those models. So we can speak that lingo. Oh, go back one more, David. And the other special note, we are a for-profit business. So we are private. And because we are a real estate entity, one specialty we do with our staff is our housing location specialist is a licensed real estate agent. So David, you can go to the next slide. So I know several agencies have, one person, one staff member to kind of go out, outreach landlords, try to find those doors. But the glory of having a licensed real estate agent like Morris Young, he knows how to speak the lingo. He's been a realtor. He's been in that industry. He has access to the MLS, and he can identify a lot of those off-market rentals and educate landlords how to diversify their rental portfolios with rental subsidy programs. So he's able to go in, see when ownership changes happen. He's able to get in contact with a lot of income investors who want to, flip these properties, break houses up into duplexes and triplexes. So he's able to, acquire those before they even start their work to kind of get our foot in the door. So as part of his outreach, he also provides education and marketing to our landlords while he's recruiting them. On our website, we do have a little landlord orientation link that anyone who's interested can go and get a program orientation. They can schedule it directly on Morris's calendar, and then he sets that up from that point and kind of takes them from there. The other thing he does is he assists participants with the housing search and the application process. So part of that process is our housing specialists. Once they do intake of a participant, they fill out a little questionnaire that they submit to Morris. So it has a lot of the information as far as background, history, income, all that. So he's able to assess those barriers that they may be coming up against, and he can actually present those to the landlords, help negotiate down some of the rental criteria, and then he also transports tenants as well. And then while he's doing that, he also coordinates with the supportive services providers so that we're all in this together. Again, I just want to stress that it's all about partnership. Partnership is how we get this done. It's between us, the landlords, supportive services. It's all of us. So as he acquires these units and recruits, he tracks the unit availability and also landlord feedback, and he brings that back with us. We can share that with our executive team so that we can try to come up with any new innovative solutions on how to better provide service and be a better partner. So one of the biggest feedbacks we received previously, and this is context leading into the next slide, is we used to manage a spreadsheet. And we'd have to call the landlords, identify ask them if their availability is still there. We exported that to a PDF and put that on our website so that our tenants and case managers could print off that list of properties. The only downfall of that is it took a lot of labor hours for our staff. It also, because it was printable, everyone in the community could go to our website, print off that landlord list, and then distribute it all over the place. So we had to come up with a new innovative solution. David, you can go two forward. Yeah, perfect. So our CEO, Mike Shore, he developed this new technology, Pad Mission. So it is our web-based housing search platform, and it was custom built for homeless services systems to coordinate and enhance their landlord engagement and housing search assistance efforts. Pad Mission, it is like other online housing search services in that it allows landlords to list and market their properties to our prospective tenants. However, Pad Mission is different because it is a closed platform that's only available to our home assisted housing programs. Landlords indicate which of the housing programs that they'll accept in their listings, and then our participants and case managers can search for those properties and units that accept their program. That way they can better narrow down their searches, not waste a lot of time calling down a list. It's more targeted search and outreach. And then also our home staff, I oversee our owner support department. So our staff, we work alongside the landlords to update their listings, provide training on programs, and of course, we always make sure their listing is updated and in real time, because real time is really what makes the difference there. All right, next, David. So some of the features and functionality, it's just like other listings. They put the property address, they can add floor plans, has all the contact information there. We also do provide for landlords to upload their applications so that instead of going back and forth with emails or calls or having to drive to the property, landlords can just upload that email, the tenant can fill it out via PDF or any other way. A lot of these are links to their landlord websites as well, so it's very accessible in that way. There's also a little message feature that's built into the software so that tenants, case managers can communicate directly with property managers back and forth via this little feature. So again, it's all about trying to speed up the leasing process. Next slide. So also on their listing, it does, as you can see up in the top right corner, they can indicate which programs they accept, which ones they want to work with. Every landlord is different. Every landlord wants to, they want to work with specific programs. They want to work with specific partners. So we need to make that available for them to be able to do that. So they also can indicate who the utility providers are for that property, who's responsible for those, the different floor plans, and how much availability they have. So it's very much like any other listing. Next slide. So our participants and their case managers, like I said, they can do basic and advanced searches via different filters to find properties and that meet their needs. So they can do everything. They can search cities, which program they're in, bedroom size, what the max rent they want. There's also, they can search by accessibility features, whether or not all utilities are included or not. So it's very easy to use across the board. And also for our landlords, we do, anytime they update their property, they go to the top of the list. So it does, promote a very competitive atmosphere for our landlords to actively use this product to help market their units. One thing as part of our partnership that I always stress is that, landlords have needs as well. Every day their unit is vacant, it's lost revenue for them. They all have different needs. They're probably paying mortgages as well. So to be true partners with our landlords, we need to make sure to look out for their interests as well. So software like this can definitely help in that instance. So we can reduce their leasing time, minimize their losses, and then they're a lot more apt to work with us in that sense and be partners in this. Next slide. Another feature that's part of here that's really good from my side is the user side. We do have a little landlord engagement progress report. So I can do this monthly to see how my team is doing, how many properties they're outreaching, how many we added, how many are currently active, everything all right there. So it all just comes in this one little report. I can filter it by different dates or programs or size of cities, all that kind of stuff. So this really helps as far as being an outreach specialist here and kind of tracking ourselves and holding ourselves accountable. Next slide. So on each property listing, at the bottom there is a little notes feature. So anytime there's activity on their property listing, there it does update. There are some automatic system updates. So as you can see on here, there's anytime a case manager sends a little message through PadMission, it documents that, which is really helpful, especially with participants. Because if you're working with specific participants and you want to find out what properties they're interested in, what properties they've already outreached, instead of waiting until your scheduled time with them a week later to go over where they want to be, you can actually pull that information before you even, on an everyday basis if you want, and outreach those properties to try to, beat out the rest of the competition. So it really provides you a lot of information. It's very user friendly. So PadMission, this innovation has really changed how the speed of our lease ups. So we used to average around 45 days. Now I believe we're down under 30, which is fairly quick, especially with a lot of our hard to house veterans and other special needs populations. And all that's done through our housing location out specialists, who's there to kind of help them through the application process, advocate for them, and also meet the landlord's needs. And I know Coleen's gonna be getting into the customer service part of this, but I just wanted to do a quick jump, quick little overview. So customer service, when it comes to landlord outreach, is absolutely essential. And customer service, I worked in the hospitality industry for years, and customer service is not about talking nice. It's not about being polite. That's just those are just small little variables. It's all about anticipating needs, being responsive, showing the customer that you care. So a few little tips that you can do in your own organizations is try to inspect your units as quickly as possible. For us, we average about within 48 hours we can get out there and inspect. I know a lot of times the way certain organizations are set up, sometimes that can be delayed a couple of weeks. So if you think about it in that sense, landlords are way more apt to work with you or work with certain providers if they know that their unit's not going to be sitting vacant for a couple of weeks, if they know it's going to get inspected quickly. Also is try to speed up your payment process. That's one of the biggest complaints that we normally get as far as our feedback from landlords is they wait far too long to receive their first checks. And on a month-to-month basis, normally fine. It's always just that initial payment. So if you can, just try to improve your payment processes as much as possible, and try to go direct deposit. Direct deposit is fast. It's almost immediate. And then in our system, they get an email as soon as we process it. So even though it doesn't post for a couple of days, they get an email that shows that we did make that payment. So that kind of gives them that assurance that we are there, money's been out the door, and they can count on us. Also, as far as application process for landlords, simplify your paperwork as much as possible. Make it electronic. Most of the forms that we use are on our website. So even if we give our participants a paper copy and it gets damaged, our landlords can still find those documents pretty easily, fill those out online, and just email those to us. And then when you do receive those, process as swiftly as possible. Landlords want to hear from you as soon as they turn in the RAFTA. So make sure you're being as responsive as possible. So make sure to answer your phones, return your calls, every day, all day. And then also part of that is, when there are issues that arise with any of our participants in their units, we want to try to support and advocate for our clients as much as possible. We also want to, advocate for the landlords and try to make sure that we are good liaisons between the tenant and the landlord, so that we can minimize evictions, minimize, a lot of the negativity that goes between, the whole tenancy, and we can be problem solvers for them. Even though we do contract and only do lease-up services for a lot of our veterans in the city of Phoenix, we still, show the landlords of those properties that we are responsive to them. So even if they can't get a hold of someone from another organization, we're going to jump in and make sure that we can connect them as soon as possible, so that they feel supported. And the big thing that I've been stressing is it's all about partnerships. So be a true partner. It's not far too often we see an us versus them mentality when it comes to landlords. So just get rid of that. Get rid of that mindset. It's better to strengthen your relationships. So go out, meet those landlord associations. Have at least a staff member or your leadership actively participate to strengthen those bonds, and then you'll be a lot more successful in at least getting one unit. If you can get one unit from a large property, and then that's all that matters, because that's at least one person that's housed. So do everything you can to show that you are a great partner, that you're looking out for your landlords, and hopefully you can be more successful. Next slide, and last slide. So that's about all I have as far as some of our landlord outreach efforts and tips on how to strengthen those bonds and work in the private markets. If you feel free to contact me anytime, my contact information is here. If you'd like more information on the PAD mission and if you'd like to schedule a demo, or receive marketing information, go to padmission.com. Also follow us on all of our social networks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Trevor, for all that information. It's definitely super impressive what you guys are able to do. And you guys keep sending in your questions because I've seen some good ones coming through. And we're going to go ahead and move into Coleen's presentation.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, you sound perfect.
Okay. Hi, my name is Coleen Salinas. I'm the Landlord Engagement Specialist for Minnesota Assistance Council for Veterans. I want to start just by giving you a little background on who MACV is, the rental market, which I work, and how MACV works with landlords. So Minnesota Assistance Council for Veterans is an organization in Minnesota dedicated to ending veteran homelessness. We're working on that by providing a variety of housing, legal, and employment services. I'm part of the housing services. So I'm MACV's landlord engagement specialist, and I heard Trevor mention a housing location specialist. I want to draw what that distinction is. The distinction is that my primary role is to be the landlord's representative in this in the transaction when veterans are leasing up units. So that means that if I'm working with a landlord to rent their unit and we bring a veteran to that unit and the veteran's not the right fit or the veteran doesn't want the unit, I don't move on with the veteran to help them look for the next unit. I stay with the unit until I find the right veteran for that unit. So my job in general is to develop relationships with landlords and encourage them to rent to homeless veterans. My background in housing has been in 2 large metro markets with very limited naturally occurring affordable housing. So my focus has usually been on housing with some sort of public subsidy, like tax credit housing or subsidized units. So within MACV, not every veteran looking for housing is going to get referred to me. The veterans who are going to get referred to me are the veterans who have barriers in addition to income, which usually means poor rental history or serious justice involvement. So in partnership with a lot of the other partners in our community, like the VA, the Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs, a ton of nonprofits, our PHAs, our county veteran services officers, we've made huge strides towards our goal of ending veteran homelessness. But the closer we get to that goal, the more we realize that the same tools that helped us begin this job aren't necessarily the same tools that we're going to need to finish it. At this point, can we scooch back a slide? At this point, many of the veterans who remain homeless in Minnesota are the hardest to serve. In addition to their poor rental histories and serious justice involvement, they're also usually low income. That means mostly below 50% AMI. So affordable housing is absolutely a must, but that housing also has to have flexible resident selection criteria to be accessible to the high barrier veterans I work with. So I wanted to start with some common ground. I know this presentation was about finding affordable housing, but I'm guessing that a lot of the folks listening probably know where the affordable housing is in your communities. It's how to access it and how to keep it. I'm going to echo what Trevor said. Creating and maintaining landlord relationships is key to ending homelessness. We have to recognize that our landlords are partners. They're not our adversaries. We're the ones who can ask them to house our veterans, but they're the ones who say yes or no. And so we have to find a way to make it easy for them to say yes and make it worthwhile for them to say yes. And clients who need affordable housing often have other barriers like poor rental history or justice involvement. I mean, if you ask me to house a veteran whose only barrier is income, that's not going to be a challenge for me. But as I said, most of the veterans I'm working with have poor rental history and justice involvement. So part of the way I do this is rather than going wide and trying to get multiple landlords, I'm looking at creating deep relationships with a few large landlords. And I do that because in my experience, developing a relationship with a smaller landlord takes as much time and energy as developing a relationship with a large landlord. So by minimizing the number of new landlords that I have to develop relationships with, I'm able to better devote myself to the customer service that's so important to the large landlord partners that we are establishing. You also just get a lot more units from a large landlord. I mean, that seems really obvious, but that is one of the key benefits. And by getting that large number of units, you're able to negotiate up front with that one landlord entity for what you need in terms of affordability, flexibility on resident selection criteria. You're able to negotiate what sort of services you're able to offer in exchange for that affordability and flexible resident selection criteria. And again, I'm going to come back to this a few times, but the bottom line is it's all about customer service. I agree with Trevor. Customer service is not about being nice. It's not about smiling and making people happy. It's about taking as much as you can off the landlord's plate and putting it on your plate when it comes to the work of leasing up and maintaining that veteran in housing. So I find specific landlords to work with in a couple of ways. When I first started at MACV, I began as an SSVF case manager. And when I had homeless clients who were looking for new housing, I was new to Minnesota at that time, so I didn't know the market very well. So one of the first places I looked was the landlords who were already renting to clients who'd come in for prevention assistance. I'd ask the prevention clients what they thought of their landlord, they liked their landlord, if they'd recommend that landlord to a friend, and if they liked their landlord, I'd keep that landlord's information on file and approach them when I had clients who were looking for housing. And since these landlords already knew that MACV could help out if a client fell behind on rent, they were often more willing to take a chance on renting to a homeless veteran than a landlord that I might cold call at that point. But that being said, I do a lot of cold calling. I'll Google local affordable housing and call site managers asking if they have any vacancies. And after I've made a few successful placements with an individual site manager, I might approach them and the larger parent company about a more formal arrangement. So the most important thing is you can't be shy when you're asking for what you need for your clients. Better to be upfront and direct about who you're working with, who you're trying to house, and also have those services in place. These are the services we're willing to offer and support to make this a smart business decision for you to rent to our clients. Next slide, please. So, actually back up one slide. I think we jumped ahead. Okay, thank you. So the first two bullet points on this slide really just expand on the idea of customer service to the landlord. In my job, I focused almost exclusively on the landlord. We all recognize that customer service to our veterans is critically important, but all of the veterans I work with already have people who are focused on prioritizing their needs. They have a case manager at MACV. They might have a VASH case manager too. They might also be working with MACV's employment and legal services. Their county veteran service officer might be advocating for them. So there are plenty of people prioritizing the veterans' needs. But the only person in the equation who's prioritizing the landlord's needs is me. So that's really where my focus needs to be. And by focusing my work on meeting the landlord's expectations, it's easier for the landlord to find a way to say yes to the veteran. So even though the focus of my work is on meeting the landlord's needs, the outcome is still to benefit veterans. So the last 4 bullet points are just a point of clarification. I really want to stress that not every interaction you might have with a landlord is landlord engagement. A lot of our everyday work with landlords focuses on getting documentation we need to make our files grant compliant or advocating on behalf of our veterans. That's obviously an essential part of the work we do, but it isn't landlord engagement. The interactions that count as landlord engagement are the ones that are focused on making the landlord's life easier. So before lease up, that might mean marketing the unit to veterans and community partners, screening applicants to make sure they're qualified for the property, reviewing your veterans' rental and criminal history with them so you can problem solve around any barriers that come up. At lease up, it means you attend the lease signing, you make sure the veteran understands the lease, you help the veteran put any utilities in their name, You make sure the veteran knows how to properly use all the appliances and fixtures in their unit so they don't damage the property. You make sure the veteran does know how to report property damage to the landlord and how to report any changes in income to the landlord of PHA if needed. Now, I know a lot of that sounds really basic, but it's amazing how often it can get overlooked and the consequences it can have. A lot of the veterans I work with are coming from long-term homeless situations, or their last landlord may have been, there's no other word for it, a slumlord, so there was no percentage in them being a good tenant. So I remember like years ago, I was working with a very young veteran who'd never had their own place. It didn't occur to me they didn't know how to use a garbage disposal, so I didn't go over that with them. Somehow they wound up creating a clog that flooded their apartment and the apartment below them. So my client lost their apartment, the neighbor below was displaced, and I lost the relationship with the landlord because this was the first tenant I'd referred to them. So little things that can be so easy to overlook are sometimes the things that really do make or break a relationship. Next slide, please. All right. So the desired outcome is units that are both affordable and have flexible resident selection criteria. About half of the veterans I work with don't have vouchers. They might not be VA eligible, or their income might be just a little too high, but they still usually have background issues and their income is still not so high that they have free open choice in the competitive housing market. So since all of my clients have a need for affordable housing, either because of their income or their voucher limits. So my starting point with any landlord is negotiating for starting rents that are within PHA standards. Because I'm usually working with tax credit housing, that's usually not too big of an ask, but I still have to find ways to incentivize the landlord to do that, to make that the smart business decision for them. So I try to save them money in other ways that make a small decrease in rent worth their while. For example, one of the things property managers will say to me is that it's not unusual to have to process 6 or 7 applications to find a single qualified tenant. They tell me that applicants are over income, they never provide all the supporting docs the landlord needs to determine eligibility, but for whatever reason, the application just doesn't go anywhere. By familiarizing myself with the landlord's resident selection criteria, filling out the application with the veteran, getting all the requested supporting documentation myself, and reviewing all of that for completeness before submitting it to the landlord, I can get them down to 1 application. I don't think I've yet had someone rejected because they didn't meet an obvious resident selection criteria. So that makes less for the landlord to do and reduces the time the unit is vacant and not earning rent. Also, if I have an established agreement with the landlord to fill their units, they can give me a heads up about a pending vacancy a couple of months before the unit is turned over. So I'm usually able to provide a qualified applicant and often a completed application without the unit ever being advertised on the open market. So the landlord saves on vacancy costs, they don't spend marketing costs, and they don't spend a lot of time working their way through unqualified applications. Flexible resident selection criteria is just as important as affordability to the veterans I work with. It doesn't matter how affordable a unit is if they won't say yes to my tenant because of background issues. So I'm always pretty upfront with landlords that the folks I'm working with have significant barriers besides income. The key to overcoming those barriers is to show the landlords that you have plans in place to prevent any recurrence of any challenging issues. So one of the tools we have at MACV that's really great is we have our own transitional housing program. We have several single-family homes scattered site throughout our metro area. Most of them are set up as SROs for single adults. In other words, they're roommate situations, but all the roommates are veterans picked by MACV. We also have a couple of family houses. So veterans who have significant barriers to open market housing can apply to live in one of our transitional houses. And by living in one of those houses, they have the opportunity to earn a positive rental history. It's very powerful to go to a landlord and say, I know what this person looks like on paper. but I can vouch for them being a good tenant because they were a good tenant to us. Next slide, please. Hey. Trevor said this too, and it's so true, to remember that there are two sets of priorities in any landlord relationship, in any interaction, and that when you're trying to develop that partnership with that landlord, to recognize what the landlord's priorities are. One of the things I remember from working in a property versus now working as a service provider was, you don't get to turn off your phone. You don't, if your phone rings on the weekend, if there's a crisis, you got to get out there and you got to answer it. So our landlords are also putting significant skin in the game when they're renting to a high barrier tenant. So it's important that we put just as much skin in the game back, that we show them that we value them as a partner. My phone never turns off. If my landlords can't turn off their phones, I can't turn off my phones. Most of the time, if a landlord has called me in the evening or on a weekend to tell me there's an emergency situation, 95% of the time, just empathizing with them, telling them that sounds terrible, making an appointment, can we talk about this more Monday? 95% of the time, that is enough. For the 5% of the time, it's not. I will go out there, I will work on a significant issue. I have met the police at units, I have met emergency services at units, I have done wellness checks with landlords at units, but just showing them that I'm not asking them to do anything I wouldn't do. Next, please. Okay, so why do we do this? It's a lot of work. So mostly to provide quality and accessible housing to our hardest to serve veterans. I want to house a veteran and have them stay housed. So part of ending veteran homelessness isn't just moving people into housing, but it's controlling the number of people who return to homelessness. Providing this high level of customer service with this frequent maintenance of the landlord relationship makes it a lot more likely that the veteran you put in that unit is going to stay in that unit, and they're not someone that you're going to have to rehouse. Investing in the landlord relationship can get our veterans preferential treatment. They can get more flexible criteria to get into the housing, more patience in resolving problems, access to non-VASH subsidized units. So far, in the past 8 months, I've gotten 7 subsidized units, with us getting right of first refusal on them for non-VASH eligible veterans with very little income. Strong landlord relationships save time and effort in the long run. So rather than approaching each homeless veteran who comes to you for housing as a unique problem, you have a steady pipeline of units that you can offer them. And lastly, a good landlord relationship will survive a bad tenant. I've had a couple go really sideways on me. I had one fellow who just abandoned the unit and went to Portland and denied he ever lived in Minnesota. Because we had an established relationship with that landlord, because we did due diligence to try and get that veteran to sign a mutual lease termination, the landlord didn't hold it against us that they had to go through the eviction process. They just did it and then they re-rented the unit to another veteran. I had another issue where I got called in because there was some police activity resulting in SWAT team response from a tenant that I had placed 3 years ago. Again, because we showed up, because we were able to get the veteran out of there and negotiate the mutual lease termination, pay for the move out, take as much work off the landlord as we could. The landlord did not hold us against us, and we got the unit back for the next tenant. Next slide. So how do you do it? Improve customer service. If there was any 2 words to take away, just customer service. So you treat the landlords as a partner, not an adversary. Communicate, be the go-between between the landlord, tenant, and other service providers. Most landlords want a single point of contact. A lot of landlords in affordable housing, they may have VASH clients, conventional Section 8 clients, self-payers. They don't want to take on the burden of tracking who's case manager. They want that one person that they can call, and that one person will just connect whoever needs to be connected with the veteran. So be painfully honest and have a plan. I never conceal negative rental history or justice involvement from landlords. And so far, that hasn't been a problem. I know when I was a housing provider on the other side, when problems started coming up with a tenant that I realized their service provider had probably been aware of and didn't share with me, that was probably a service provider I wasn't going to answer the phone for again. It's okay to bring me someone who's got difficult background issues or ongoing behavioral issues, but let's talk about it and let's come up with a plan for how we're going to address them when they come up. I know recently, one of my most valued landlord partners really helped me out of a jam. I had a client referred to me from Wisconsin. It was a family with a VASH voucher. The voucher holder, the veteran, was in late stage hospice care, and it was very critical to get a lease signed before the veteran passed away in order to preserve the voucher for the family. Unfortunately, the family also had 3 evictions, $13,000 in debt to prior landlords, and no income. I brought all this to the landlord, and he said, okay, if the VASH voucher doesn't kick in, what's plan B? And I said, well, we have some disabled vouchers, and 2 of the children are special needs. We can enroll them in that program. And he says, okay, and if that doesn't work, what's plan C? Well, we can pay the market rate rent out of SSVF until we can locate a project-based subsidized unit for them. And he thought about it and said, this is not the smartest decision I've ever made, but so far you've always come through, so I'm going to take a chance on them. And we were able to get them housing. Empathize. Got to remember landlords are people too. I know one of the most frustrating things for me when I was a housing provider was when I'd bring up something that had happened in a unit, whether it was property damage or unpaid rent, and to have the service provider look at me and say, yeah, my client's going through a really hard time. Well, so am I now, but just remember that the person you're talking to is a person. You should always, if someone tells you something's bad has happened, you're always very sorry that it happened. It doesn't mean you're agreeing with what they say, but you are sorry that it's happened, and they should know that. So know the housing basics, tax credits, Section 8, fair housing, etc. This has been very helpful. Recently, I had a landlord approach me who mentioned that he was participating in a local tax credit program. I already was familiar with the program. I knew who was eligible for it, who wasn't. And so again, the first person I was able to present to him was qualified, and he was happy with that experience because he tried working with a couple of other agencies and that hadn't happened. And because he was happy with that first experience, he gave me the whole building. And so now every person living in that building is a veteran. Practice thoughtful placement. And by that, be mindful of what you're asking a landlord to take on. I only work with high barrier veterans, but that being said, I would never put all of my veterans who are currently experiencing behavioral challenges in the same building. You don't want to burden any one landlord with all your hardest to serve clients. And lastly, once our veteran, always our veteran. One of the frustrations I hear from landlords is service providers who disappear on them. And the service provider might say, well, the client's disengaging, or they're not meeting the metrics they need to remain eligible for services. And that might be true, and that might be your program's requirements. But you asked the landlord to make a year-long commitment. So you need to find a way to honor that commitment in return. Next slide, please. So services to provide the single point of contact. I think I went over that earlier. Your number is always the right number. Don't give the landlord another number to call. You call that other person if there's another case manager or agency involved, and you get them to call the landlord. Tenant education and rigorously support lease compliance. I find a lot of the folks I work with just don't know lease basics. They don't know, for example, the difference between a visitor and an unauthorized tenant. Or they may not realize that their lease holds them accountable for the behavior of their guests, so they should be careful about who they let into their home. Attend lease signings. This is really critical. You want to hear what the landlord's telling them at the lease signing. You want to be present for that. You want to know that you're all on the same page, that you all heard the same things. You may want to add anything to what the landlord's telling your client based on what those clients' needs are. Unit visits and site visits. For my highest barrier clients, part of the service remains for at least the first year of tenancy, a monthly unit visit, and I also tour the site and maybe the local neighborhood around the site, depending on any concerns in the neighborhood. What you're doing in those site visits, you're not duplicating case management, you're not a service provider in that moment, you're just checking for lease compliance. So does the property look good? Is it clean? Is it undamaged? Are there signs of smoke, unauthorized pets, unauthorized tenants? You report any concerns to the landlord immediately. That is something you negotiate with the individual landlord. You may ask a landlord like, hey, I catch someone smoking. Do you want to know that right away, or do you want to give me a chance to work with them? Follow the landlord's lead on that one. Complete applications, including required compliance. I know if anyone's worked in affordable housing, and we all have, the compliance requirements can be pretty up there. So make sure you get all those docs for the landlord, because again, the delays on getting that required compliance cost the landlord vacancy. Market vacant units and provide appropriate applicants. Unit inspections. And negotiate mutual lease terminations and coordinate move-outs. This is really, really important. Landlords want to avoid eviction. It also benefits your veteran to keep an eviction off their record. So while you're hoping every tenancy works out, some just aren't going to. So at that point, you should have a plan in place for negotiating the mutual lease termination. You might even want to come up with a standard doc template for that. By coordinating the move-outs, I mean, if your agency allows, if you have the budget, you pay for the mover, you get the veterans' things out of there, you put them into storage. You're trying to, again, make this as painless as you can for both parties. The benefit to that is the landlord relationship will be preserved and your veteran gets to keep the eviction off their record. Next. So I have my own internal metrics for success. Yeah.
Just for the sake of time, I feel like we might cut you off right here and jump into the questions. I feel like the metrics
I'm so sorry. Can we just go ahead for a couple? Well, I'll stop you when there's one more that I want to show for sure.
Absolutely. And then I feel like the rest of them you will cover in the Q&A, because I know what the next couple of slides are. And then I feel like a lot of the questions that came in, you'll hit on, some of the points anyway. But yeah, you're welcome to go through the next slide and then we'll jump into Q&A.
Okay, next. Skip this one. All right, this is the one I wanted to focus on, then I'll be done. So this was a pilot program. I officially started this job in October, but I started counting the data in February when I started doing it more informally. This is the first sample, 34 veterans and their families housed, 6 non-VA eligible, 0 prevention requests for that year, no evictions, no additional deposits required. Okay.
Sorry, I feel like it's such good information, and I know probably our panelists are just sitting there in amazement. I feel like a lot of the questions that came in, you'll cover throughout the rest of your presentation anyway. So I feel like just to bring Trevor back in on the discussion and definitely address some of our attendees' questions and thoughts. So I guess first things first, a lot of the questions that came in are addressing veteran housing issues that we've all heard questions about before, housing veterans with pets. Have you guys found success, either Trevor or Coleen, in the programs that you use and the partnerships you have in housing veterans with sex offenses or who can't part with their pets, and how are you doing that?
Sure. So pets are also emotional support animals. I hope people know that there are paths to, if you have a care provider who is willing to say this animal is very important for this person's emotional health, and they're willing to sign that letter, most landlords will work with that. And as far as the sex offenses go, I never start out by asking that, but I've gotten there. Most recently, one of my large veteran providers, or landlord providers, because they're really happy with the quality of services they've gotten, has agreed to waive the restriction on lifetime offenders for us.
And then how about on your end, Trevor? Have you guys had any success with these two groups, and in what ways are you addressing these issues?
It's, I think Coleen kind of covered it there. The other thing when it comes to SOs, a lot of times, if you sit down to landlord and kind of explain the backstory of it, a lot of times they'll feel a little more comfortable. I know, like here in Arizona, if you get caught urinating in public, then you have to register as a sex offender. So, for something like that, a lot of times they're like, yeah, we'll waive what we need to.
Yep.
Gotcha. Okay.
I have a right of first refusal on 34 units with over 3 buildings, and because every other tenant in that building is also going to be one of my clients, the landlord feels more comfortable letting sex offenders into those 3 buildings, since they don't have a competing community in those buildings. Everyone in there is one of my clients.
Gotcha. A question came in during Trevor's presentation about housing in cities that are primarily student focused. And so I'm thinking that they are wanting more information about doing that in cities where there might be more competition for low cost units or maybe seasonal renters. So how are you guys approaching that?
That actually hasn't been a demand I've had.
Yeah, so here in Arizona, we get a lot of snowbirds and a lot of students being here in Phoenix with ASU. A lot of that is just with your landlord partnerships. A lot of times, students are here for a portion of the year, but it's just all about creating and building those relationships with landlords, and knowing that for that whole year, entire time, that that they will have stable, consistent rent. A lot of times there are similar issues as far as behavioral stuff that happens with students, that happens that we get complaints about with our population as well. So it's just all relationships. I mean, a lot of times competition's there, but the more you show that you care for the landlord and you're looking out for their interests, then the better.
Right. And a question that came up a lot during your presentation, Trevor, was, I guess, some of the more in-depth ways that Pad Mission works, and then also just the services that Home Inc. provides. So kind of who's paying you and you're paying who. And also, I know that there are fees associated with Pad Mission, but can you just briefly touch on that service?
Yeah, so Pad Mission was developed by our CEO, Mike Shore, and one of his partners. I would just suggest on that to go to padmission.com and request a demo. You can outreach to them. They can provide you the prices and all that information. As far as the funding issues, we contract with a lot of our agencies are fund grantees. So we just get a management fee from them, and that's how that all kind of works.
Perfect. 2 more questions I definitely want to answer. One of our attendees wrote in and said that they are experiencing issues with their payment process lately. Once they create a voucher, the billing department seems to be behind about 3 months. So how do you suggest approach that topic with landlords?
So their internal billing department's backed up? Is that what I
Yeah, I
understand?
think that's right. Yes.
Yeah, so that's one of those hard conversations you need to have, within your
Yep.
own organization. You have to be able to make fast payments, if you want to be successful in housing, because that's what landlords expect.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, your
yeah.
processes should be built to meet the needs of your customers, not your internal needs.
Yeah, so I'd consider breaking down some of those silos, try to be, create a lot more interdependent processes that are a little more streamlined.
Gotcha. And then kind of the elephant in the room, COVID-19. Are there any challenges that you're seeing due to COVID-19 that's impacting landlords specifically, or the unit availability in your area? And have you had to combat any COVID-19 related eviction?
No evictions. It has slowed down the move-in process and the availability of units. Landlords have folks that they're not able to evict right now. The application process has also gotten more complicated, particularly in tax credit and Section 8 housing, because they're not able to waive their compliance requirements. So a lot of the supporting documentation they need comes from agencies whose work may have been impacted by COVID-19. So Social Security Agency, getting birth certificates, things like that. But most of the landlords I work with have adapted their application process to where they can do the applications as phone interviews, and then people can e-sign the app. So that part has not been impacted.
Yeah, on our side, the most we've seen is, management offices just being closed. But, most of them know us, we work together. So when it comes to tenants viewing units, that's what technology's for, FaceTime. A lot of times I drive out to a unit, we video chat, show them the unit, kind of do the negotiation that way. So, like I said, if you can digitize a lot of your paperwork and processes, I mean, we've been doing that for years, so we already almost prepared for COVID. But yeah, just be as digital, embrace technology and try to be innovative as possible.
Right. Well, that's kind of the theme for the sessions moving forward for this week, is kind of building on some of the techniques and tools that we already have in place and some of the services we've sort of perfected, and kind of adapting those to the time we're living in right now, obviously with COVID-19. So I feel like definitely leaving the session with several sources and tools to kind of use in our own communities. They will be sent the slides. I had a couple people asking that throughout the Q&A. We will be emailing them out. So once we wrap up this session, you'll be sent a survey to kind of rate how you think the session went, and then also an email video of this specific session. The slides themselves will be emailed at a later date. Anyways, I want to go ahead and thank both of you guys for participating in the discussion today. I thought it was great. I feel like definitely got me thinking, and I want to thank everybody who's in attendance for participating, and obviously for the service you provide to veterans in your own communities. Like I said, complete the survey as soon as it pops up, and we'll see you guys the rest of the week.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank y'all.